The delegation chamber smelled of burnt ozone and failed diplomacy. I pressed my sensory membranes against the observation port, watching the human female stride through what remained of Sector 7 with absolutely zero regard for the laws of biological preservation. Her name was Kira Voss, and she was, by all available data, completely out of her mind. Councillor Thex, my aide Morna whispered, her vocal sacs trembling. The containment breach. The temperature in that corridor is registering 420 degrees Kelvin. I am aware, I replied, unable to look away. She is not wearing thermal protection. Also aware. Sir, her species classification lists them as fragile. Class 7, biodiversity, environmental tolerance rating of -12 to 40 Celsius, requiring constant atmospheric regulation, and Morna. I held up one appendage. Shut up and watch. The human continued walking. Not running, mind you. Walking, like she was taking a pleasant stroll, through a park and not a corridor that had been hit by a plasma explosion 15 minutes prior. Her jacket, some primitive woven material, had caught fire at the hem. She patted it out with her bare hand, patted it, then kept walking. The fire suppression systems kicked in, raining chemical foam across the passage. Kira Voss did not even flinch. She wiped her face with her sleeve and continued forward toward the trapped science team. Get me her personnel file, I ordered. All of it. Every medical scan, every psychological evaluation, every incident report from her time on station. Sir, there are quite a few incident reports. Why does that not surprise me? Morna pulled up the data on the central display, and I felt my secondary heart skip a rhythm. The list scrolled on for 3 full rotations. Bar fight with a Krell enforcer. Result. Krell hospitalized. Unauthorized spacewalk to repair external sensors during a radiation storm. Result. Sensors repaired. Voss, treated for minor radiation exposure and released. Verbal altercation with Station Commander Prex over safety protocols. Result. Protocols revised. That last one caught my attention. She argued with Prex and won? Apparently, she called him, and I quote, a chittering desk ornament with delusions of authority. I made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a wheeze. Ancestors preserve us. She insulted a Vrex combat veteran to his face. And lived. And lived. On the screen, Voss had reached the sealed door where 3 members of Dr. Halvin's research team were trapped. The door had warped from the heat. Standard procedure would be to wait for engineering teams with proper cutting equipment. The human placed both hands on the door, tested its temperature, then wedged her fingers into the smallest gap at the edge. She cannot possibly, Morna began. Kira Voss pulled. Her arms trembled, muscles standing out in cords beneath her skin. The door did not move. She adjusted her grip, pulled again. Something in the frame cracked. She shifted her stance, braced one foot against the wall, and threw her entire body weight into the effort. The door shrieked. Metal groaned. And then, centimeter by centimeter, it began to move. That is 3,000 kilograms of reinforced durasteel, I said faintly. Per square meter. The frame is designed to withstand hull breaches. Human adrenaline response, Morna read from the file. Temporarily increases strength by 2 to 5 times baseline. Diminishes pain reception. Triggers what they call fight or flight response. And she chose fight, against a door. The door gave way with a final metallic scream. Voss stumbled backward, caught herself, then immediately plunged into the smoke-filled room beyond. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. At 5, she emerged dragging Dr. Halvin, a Pelthian whose body mass was easily twice hers. She went back in. 6, 7, 8. Came out with researcher Tolk and assistant Verum, one under each arm. Then she collapsed. Medical team to Sector 7. I barked into the comm. Immediate priority. Already en route, the dispatcher replied. They were waiting. Apparently, the human med tech told them, and I quote again, that Voss would do something catastrophically stupid, and they should be ready. Do her own people just expect this behavior? Reading her psychological profile now, sir. Earth military background. Something called a combat rescue specialist. Her evaluation notes describe her as, let me see, stubborn beyond reason, pathologically protective of team members, refuses to acknowledge personal limitations, and, Morna paused, has what they term a hero complex, big enough to have its own gravitational field. I watched the medical team load Voss onto a transport gurney. She was conscious, arguing with them. Even from here, through the observation port, I could read her body language. She wanted to go back, to check for more survivors. While her hands were burned, her lungs were full of smoke, and her body temperature was spiking into dangerous ranges. Fragile, I murmured. We classified them as fragile. To be fair, sir, by most metrics they are. Their cellular structure is remarkably delicate. They require narrow environmental parameters. They lack natural armor, venom, psionic abilities. Their homeworld was barely a Class 4 when we discovered them. And yet, Morna agreed. The medical transport disappeared down the corridor. I turned away from the observation port and accessed the incident report I would need to file. My claws hovered over the input pad. How did one describe this? The human ignored basic survival instincts. The human displayed irrational protective behavior. The human single-handedly opened a sealed security door through sheer stubborn determination and what I suspected was pure spite against the universe. Counselor? Morna prompted. The report? I am thinking. I pulled up the original contact assessments from when humanity had joined the Galactic Council 20 cycles prior. Fragile. The word appeared 16 times in the opening summary alone. Low natural defenses. Requires technological support for most environments. Prone to injury. Short lifespan. Limited physical capabilities. I deleted my draft and started over. 3 hours later, Kira Voss walked into my office. She had both hands wrapped in regenerative bandages, a breathing assist tube in her nose, and a look on her face that suggested she would rather be, literally, anywhere else. Councillor Thex, she said, her voice rough. I was told you wanted to see me. Sit. Please. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. She sat, moving with the careful precision of someone whose body was informing her that recent activities had been, perhaps, inadvisable. I suppose this is about the door, she said. Among other things. She shrugged, a peculiar human gesture. Emergency situation. People in danger. I did what needed doing. You ignored safety protocols. You entered a contaminated zone without proper equipment. You exceeded recommended physical exertion limits by what our medical team estimates was approximately 4,000%. So, write me up? She raised one bandaged hand slightly. Look, I know I am not great at following rules. My file probably told you that. But those people would have died if someone had waited for proper procedure. I am not writing you up. That got her attention. Her eyes, an unsettling shade of brown that seemed to catch light strangely, focused on me with sudden intensity. Then, why am I here? I am trying to understand, I said carefully. What exactly your species is? She blinked. Human, obviously. Yes, human, classified as fragile, requiring specific environmental conditions, limited natural abilities. This is what our assessment teams determined. Okay? You walked through fire, Voss. It was more like very hot air. You opened a security door with Your bare hands. It was already damaged. You carried out 3 people while your skin was actively burning. First-degree burns, mostly. The report is exaggerating. She shifted in the chair. Is there a point to this? I pulled up the contact assessment and turned the screen toward her. Read this. Tell me how accurate you think it is. She scanned the document, her expression growing more bemused with each line. Fragile? We are fragile? She laughed. Actually laughed, then winced and touched her ribs. Sorry, shouldn't laugh. Hurts. But seriously? This is what you all think of us? This is what the data indicated. Then your data collection needs work. She leaned forward. Look, yeah, we are not the strongest species out there. We do not have armor plating or natural weapons or whatever. We need air and water and food. Our bodies break if you hit them hard enough. But fragile? She shook her head. Fragile is fine, China. Fragile is glass sculptures. Humans? We are more. Like cockroaches. Cockroaches. Earth pest. Famously hard to kill. We adapt. We survive. We keep going when we should not be able to. She tapped the desk with one bandaged finger. You want to know what humans are? We are the species that looked at every predator on our planet and decided we could take them. We are the species that got hit by asteroids and ice ages and plagues and kept going. We climbed out of caves with nothing but rocks and attitude and built starships. The assessment? I tried again. The assessment is looking at the wrong things. Yeah, individually we are squishy. But we are also relentless. We have this thing where we decide something needs to happen, and then we just do not stop until it happens. Pain? We ignore it. Fear? We feel it and move forward anyway. Death? We get mad about it and refuse to cooperate. I stared at her. That is not a survival trait. That is a psychological disorder. Maybe, she grinned, showing her flat omnivore teeth. But it works. It got you hospitalized. And it got 3 people out alive. Worth it. She stood, still moving carefully. Are we done? Medical wants me back for another scan, and I have reports to file. One more question. Shoot. Would you do it again? She did not even hesitate. In a heartbeat. Every time. You do not leave people behind. That is not what humans do. After she left, I sat in silence for a long moment. Then I pulled up the contact assessment again and began writing a revision. A comprehensive revision. One that would require quite a lot of explanation to the council. Fragile, I typed, is a catastrophically incorrect classification. Recommend immediate reassessment of human capabilities, particularly regarding stress response, pain tolerance, and what appears to be a species-wide inability to recognize when they should stop. Also recommend updating psychological profiles to include humanity's apparent collective agreement that impossible is a suggestion rather than a limitation. Morna appeared in the doorway. The human is either the bravest being I have ever met or the most insane. Possibly both. Council is not going to like that report. Council can file their objections through proper channels. I saved the document and transmitted it to the central database. In the meantime, I want you to pull all incident reports involving humans from across the station. All of them. Sir, that will take hours. Then you should start now. She left, muttering in her native tongue. I returned to the observation port and looked out at the station, at the 1,000 species moving through its corridors, at the carefully maintained peace we had built over centuries. And somewhere out there, Kira Voss was probably arguing with medical staff about being released early while her body was still healing, because of course she was. I pulled up the communication logs from Earth, the requests for human personnel that had been filed over, the past cycles, security positions, mostly, emergency response, high-risk assignments, the kinds of jobs that most species tried to avoid. Humans volunteered for them. They volunteered to run into burning buildings and breach sites and combat zones. They volunteered to put themselves between danger and others. They did it reflexively, apparently, like breathing. My terminal chimed. Morna had sent the first batch of incident reports. I opened the file. Human engineer Rafe Danvers manually held a coolant leak closed for 4 hours until repairs could be completed, suffering severe chemical burns to both arms. Status: treated and released. Returned to duty following day. Human Security Officer Zara Mendez engaged 6 armed raiders alone after they breached Docking Bay 3, sustaining multiple injuries. All raiders neutralized. Status: 3 weeks medical leave. Commendation for bravery. Human botanist Leo Park remained in contaminated greenhouse during atmospheric failure to protect research specimens, breathing toxic air for 12 minutes. Status: full lung regeneration therapy. Returned to work immediately after to check on plants. The list continued. Page after page. Humans doing things that should not be survivable. Humans ignoring injuries that would incapacitate most species. Humans simply refusing to die when logically they should. I thought about Kira Voss patting out flames with her bare hand like it was a minor inconvenience. Define fragile, I muttered. Yes, please, someone define it. Because I am no longer certain I understand the word. The communication array beeped. Incoming message from Central Command. Marked priority. I opened it reluctantly. Councillor Thex, regarding your revised assessment of human classification. Request clarification on several points. Human tolerance for personal risk appears inconsistent with survival instinct models. Please explain. I looked at the reports still scrolling across my screen. At the medical records, showing injuries that should have been fatal. At incident after incident of humans doing the impossible because it needed doing. They are not fragile, I typed back. They are absolutely terrifying. And we need to revise every assumption we have made about them immediately. I sent the message and leaned back in my chair, my mind churning through implications and complications, and the sudden certainty that humanity's introduction to the galaxy was going to change everything. They called her species fragile. She walked through fire and said, "Define fragile." And now we had to find an answer. The council chamber buzzed with what passed for alarmed conversation among 14 different species. Councillor Prex, the Vrex, whose authority Kira Voss had so memorably questioned, stood at the central podium with his mandibles clicking in what I had learned to recognize as profound irritation. "Thex," he said, his translator rendering his speech in clipped tones, "your report suggests we fundamentally misunderstood an entire species. This is not a small claim. I am aware." I rose from my seat, my formal robes settling around me. "I am also correct." "Correct?" Councillor Yarvik of the Celtran delegation leaned forward, her scales shimmering with agitation. "You want us to reclassify humans based on one individual's reckless behavior?" "Not one individual. I have documented 473 similar incidents across this station alone in the past solar cycle." I activated the central display. Incident reports flooded the screen, each one highlighting another impossible thing a human had done and survived. This is not anomalous behavior. This is standard human operating procedure. "They are suicidal," Yarvik declared. "No, they are protective. There is a difference." I pulled up Kira Voss's medical scans from after the rescue. Look at these readings. Her body was actively shutting down non-essential functions to maintain critical operations. Pain, receptors suppressed. Energy reserves redirected to muscular systems. Cognitive functions narrowed to focus exclusively on the immediate threat. "Standard stress response," Prex said. "At levels that would kill most species, yes. But humans do not just survive this state. They weaponize it. They trigger it deliberately when circumstances require. Morna appeared at my shoulder, holding a data tablet. "Sir, you asked for comparative analysis? The results are, concerning." I took the tablet. The numbers made my primary heart skip again. Humans have a 97% survival rate in situations classified as unsurvivable by galactic standard metrics. The chamber fell silent. "That is impossible," someone whispered. "That is what I thought, until I watched one of them rip open a security door." I turned to face the assembly. We made an error in our initial assessment, a significant one. We measured human capabilities under optimal conditions and assumed those were their limits. We were wrong. "What are you suggesting?" Thex asked slowly. "I am suggesting that humans have no upper limit that we have discovered. Push them, and they push back harder. Threaten them, and they become more dangerous. Hurt them, and they simply refuse to acknowledge it until the threat is neutralized." Yarvik's scales rippled with something that might have been fear. "That is not a civilized trait. Tell that to the 3 researchers who are alive because of it." The doors to the chamber opened. I had not called for interruptions, but the guard who entered looked shaken enough that I did not object. "Councillors, we have a situation. Docking Bay 12. There has been an explosion. Every species has phrases they use when disaster strikes. Humans say their blood runs cold. Mine heated to dangerous levels as I bolted from the chamber, Thex right behind me. The corridors blurred past. Emergency lighting flickered. The acrid smell of burning composite materials filled the air. We reached the observation deck overlooking the bay. The scene below was chaos in its purest form. A cargo transport had suffered a catastrophic engine failure during docking procedures. Fire suppression systems fought against flames that fed on fuel and oxygen in equal measure. The bay crew evacuated in good order, their training evident. Except one person was running toward the inferno, not away from it. "Oh no," I breathed. "Is that?" Thex's mandibles went rigid. "Voss? Of course it is Voss." Kira Voss had apparently been in the bay when the explosion occurred. Her hands were still bandaged from 3 days prior. That did not stop her from sprinting toward the burning transport while everyone else retreated. "What is she doing?" Thex demanded. "Something catastrophically stupid, probably." I activated the bay communications. "Voss, stand down! Emergency teams are en route." She did not respond. Or rather, she responded by climbing into the transport through a gap in the hull that was actively venting flames. "She is going to die," Yarvik said from behind us. Half the council had followed. "Probably," I agreed, unable to look away. Seconds ticked past. 10, 20, 30. The fire intensified. The transport's structure groaned. At 45 seconds, engineering teams arrived with proper equipment and began setting up containment fields. At 50 seconds, Kira Voss emerged from the transport carrying a Threxian child in her arms. The child could not have been more than 4 solar cycles old. Its carapace was still soft, unformed, vulnerable. It must have wandered onto the transport somehow, been overlooked in the evacuation. Voss had her body curled around the small being, shielding it from the heat and smoke. She made it 3 meters before her legs gave out. She went down hard, but even falling, she twisted to take the impact on her shoulder rather than the child. A medical team swarmed them immediately. The Threxian youngster was crying, but appeared unharmed. Voss was unconscious, her breathing shallow and labored. Second-degree burns over 40% of her body. I heard the medical tech reporting. Smoke, inhalation, potential spinal damage from the fall, moving her to critical care. Thex turned to me, his expression unreadable. "You were saying about human behavior patterns?" She saw a child. Nothing else mattered. That is not rational. No, it is human. We stood in silence, watching the medical team work. The Threxian child's parent had been found, a cargo supervisor who had thought her offspring was safely in the station's youth center. The reunion was immediate and tearful. The mother kept trying to reach Voss, to thank her, but the medical team was already transporting the human to surgery. Third time in as many planetary rotations, Jarvik observed. At this rate, she will not survive the month. You would think that, I said. Her medical file suggests otherwise. She has been hospitalized 17 times since arriving on station. Each time, medical staff predict lengthy recovery periods. Each time, she is back on duty, in half the expected time frame. How? When I asked her physician, a human doctor named Marcus Okonkwo, he laughed and said, quote, "Humans are too stubborn to stay injured. Apparently, they have a saying, that which does not kill us makes us stronger." That makes no biological sense, Prex said. Welcome to humanity. The mood had shifted significantly. We reviewed footage of the rescue frame by frame, watched Voss assess the situation in microseconds, saw her decision process, which apparently consisted entirely of child in danger, must save, everything else irrelevant. She did not hesitate. Councillor Morvan of the Pelthian delegation noted, "Not even for a moment. Hesitation would have resulted in the child's death." I replied, "Humans calculate these things differently than we do. They do not weigh their own survival against others. They simply act." "That is beautiful and horrifying in equal measure," Morvan said quietly. Prex activated his terminal. "I have been reviewing historical data from Earth's records before they achieved space travel. Do you know how many times their civilization nearly destroyed itself? I have read estimates ranging from 6 to 12 major extinction-level events," I said. 14. 14 times they came within a single generation of complete annihilation. War, plague, environmental collapse, nuclear weapons. 14 times they should have gone extinct. His mandibles clicked rapidly. And 14 times they survived through sheer refusal to die. "They call it spite," Morna offered. She had been unusually quiet. I asked a human engineer about it, about why they keep going when logic says they should stop. He said humans run on spite and coffee, whatever coffee is. "It is a stimulant beverage," I explained absently, "mildly toxic to most species. Humans consume it in quantities that should induce cardiac arrest." "Of course they do," Jarvik muttered. The medical update arrived mid-session. Kira Voss was stable. Expected recovery time was 3 weeks minimum. She had already asked when she could return to duty. Her doctor had apparently responded with some very colorful human profanity and ordered her sedated. "She is impossible," I said, reading the report. "She is human," Prex corrected, "and we need to adjust our understanding accordingly." The vote was unanimous. Human classification would be revised from fragile to, after much debate, adaptively resilient, with extreme stress tolerance. It did not adequately capture what we had witnessed, but galactic standard nomenclature had no existing category for absurdly, impossibly, stubbornly refuses to acknowledge physical limitations. I visited Voss in medical 2 days later. She was awake, propped up in bed, arguing with her doctor about physical therapy schedules. "You cannot accelerate bone knitting," Dr. Okonkwo was saying. "It takes time." "But I could do light duty. Paperwork. Something. You have third-degree burns and fractured vertebrae." "The answer is no. You are being unreasonable. I am being a doctor. You are being a typical human." He noticed me and nodded. "Counselor, please talk sense into her. I have other patients who actually listen to medical advice." He left, muttering. Voss looked at me with an expression that might have been sheepish, if humans were capable of true shame regarding their self-preservation instincts. "Before you start," she said, "I know what you are going to say. Do you? I was reckless. I could have died. I should have waited for proper teams. I violated about 16 safety protocols." She shifted, wincing. "But there was a kid in there." "I know. So I had to." "I know that too." I settled into the visitor's chair. Your doctor says you will be released in 3 weeks. He is being pessimistic. I am thinking 10 days. Of course you are. I pulled up my tablet. While you are recovering, I need your input on something. Sure. What? The council is creating new guidelines for human personnel. Safety protocols, psychological support systems, medical response procedures. We are realizing that our standard approaches do not work for your species. She snorted. Because we do not follow the rules? Because the rules were written for species that have functional self-preservation instincts. I showed her the draft document. We need human perspective on what will actually be effective. She read through it, her expression growing more amused. You want to assign mandatory rest periods after high-stress incidents. Yes. Humans will ignore those. We suspected as much. Hence the request for input. Make them competitive. Give awards for most consecutive days without hospitalization. Humans love competitions. We will avoid medical crises just to win a stupid trophy. I made a note. That might actually work. Also, the psychological support thing. Do not make it sound like therapy. Call it tactical debriefing or performance analysis. Frame it as making us better at our jobs, not fixing our heads. But it is therapy. Yeah, but we are more likely to go if we can pretend it is not. She grinned. We are stubborn about asking for help. Trick us into it. We spent an hour going through the document. Her suggestions were practical, cynical, and disturbingly effective. She understood her species' collective psychology in ways our analysts had completely missed. Can I ask you something personal? I said finally. Depends on how personal. Why do you do it? Risk yourself for others? You barely knew those researchers. That Threxian child was a complete stranger. Why? She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than I had heard before. When I was 7, there was a fire in my building. Earth years, that is. I got trapped in my apartment. A firefighter, named Maria Santos, came through a window, through actual flames, and carried me out. She had burns all over her arms. I asked her later why she did it, why she risked herself for a kid she did not know. What did she say? She said, because that is what we do. We take care of each other. That is what makes us human. Voss looked at her bandaged hands. I joined search and rescue because of her. Because someone was brave enough to come through fire for a scared kid. And now, that is what I do. I go through the fire, so someone else does not have to. That lasts. She met my eyes. You all keep calling us fragile. Maybe our bodies are, but our will, our determination to protect each other, that is unbreakable. I had no response to that. What could I say? She was right. The child's mother wants to meet you, I said instead, when you are recovered, to thank you properly. I was just doing my job. You saved her, child's life, at significant personal cost. In Threxian culture, that creates a life debt. Oh, well, tell her no debt necessary. Seriously, I would do it again. That is precisely what concerns us. She laughed, then grabbed her ribs. Ow! Do not make me laugh. But yeah, I get it. I will try to be more careful. You will not. No, probably not. But I will try to make it look like I am trying. I left medical shaking my head but unable to suppress what humans call a smile. Morna met me in the corridor with another stack of reports. More incidents? I asked wearily. Commendations, actually. For Voss. 17 different department heads want to recognize her actions. Engineering wants to name a shuttle after her. The Threxian community is proposing a statue. A statue. They are very serious about life debts. Tell them to wait until she is actually healed before immortalizing her. She would find some way to get hurt at her own statue unveiling. We walked back toward my office, through corridors that hummed with station life. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy, living and working together. All protected by protocols and procedures and safety measures that, I now understood, were designed for species that valued their own survival appropriately. Humans did not fit that model. They valued other lives above their own. They ran toward danger instead of away from it. They broke themselves, protecting others, and called it a normal day at work. And somehow, impossibly, they survived. My terminal chimed with another medical update. Kira Voss had been caught attempting to do physical therapy exercises despite doctor's orders. She had been sedated again. Expected unconsciousness duration was 4 hours. Medical staff were taking bets on whether she would actually stay down that long. Fragile. What a profoundly inadequate word. I began drafting the formal report to Galactic Command. The one that would change how we viewed humanity going forward. The one that would acknowledge we had been spectacularly wrong about Earth's newest members. They called her species fragile, I wrote. She walked through fire and said, "Define fragile. We have no adequate answer. We have no framework for understanding a species that survives through sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. We have no protocols for beings who sacrifice themselves reflexively, instinctively, without hesitation or expectation of reward." I paused, considering my next words carefully. Recommendation. Humans should be reclassified as a paradox species, individually vulnerable yet collectively indestructible, physically limited yet behaviorally unstoppable. They are not fragile. They are terrifying. And they are exactly the allies we need. I sent the report and leaned back, exhausted. Somewhere in medical, Kira Voss was probably already waking up ahead of schedule and planning her next catastrophically heroic stunt. Somewhere on Earth, millions more just like her were preparing to join the galaxy, bringing their particular brand of protective insanity with them. The Council would adapt. We had no choice. Humanity had arrived, and they were not going to change who they were to fit our expectations. We would have to change instead. The universe, I reflected, was about to become a much more interesting place, and considerably more complicated. But perhaps that was appropriate. Perhaps we had grown too comfortable in our careful civilizations, too attached to our protocols and procedures. Perhaps we needed someone to remind us what courage actually looked like, even if that someone kept getting themselves hospitalized in the process. My terminal chimed one final time. A message from Kira Voss, sent from her medical bed before sedation took full effect. Thanks for understanding. We are not fragile. We are just built different. Built different indeed. I closed my terminal and smiled. Humanity had been in the galaxy for only 20 solar cycles, and they had already turned our understanding of biology, psychology, and survival instinct upside down. I could not wait to see what they would do next, though I sincerely hoped it involved fewer explosions and less time in medical. Somehow, I doubted that particular hope would be realized. Humans being human, after all.